This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 341 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's crushing victory in the Revierderby, and we will preview Wednesday's Champions League tie against Zenit St. Petersburg. For all that and more, joins me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias. Derbysieger Matthias.
Yeah, tired, snowed in, cold. But very, very happy. It's a great weekend as a Dortmund fan. I'm going to ignore all other sports and all other teams and just focus on the Bundesliga and Borussia Dortmund. How are you, Stefan?
Yeah, better than Andy Dalton.
Oh, jeez.
I'm sorry. I know you're a Cowboys fan. It probably wasn't your weekend, was it?
Well, how can you lose to a team literally called the football team? Jeez.
Well, it's I think the Philadelphia Eagles. Not that I'm a big fan, but I think they're in the lead in the NFC East with
only because they had a tie
and a tie.
Because they had a tie. Who gets a tie in football?
All right, so we've got the weather update and the NFL update out of the way. Maybe it's time for our sponsor segment.
Wir sind komplett schuldenfrei, wir zahlen keinen einzigen Euro an Zinsen.
Alright, this episode is sponsored by Jordan Hunt, who is encouraging us to have a Jadon Sancho discussion and about his form down the line, which most certainly we will have. And it's also sponsored by Nicolas Marquart and George Clark and Thomas. So everyone out there, thank you so much for supporting us. And obviously, the euphoria of a derby win is making inroads here. If you want to sponsor an episode, go to patreon.com/theyellowwall for more information. And now it is time to dive into the derby win. Matthias, it was a very calm, almost serene 3-0 blowout, I would say. Schalke were utterly without a chance. So, what are your main takeaways? I'll just ask very generally.
Well, the takeaway is that my newborn son, James, slept through the whole thing on my arm. I think that says a lot about how relaxing this experience was and calming and soothing. It was, having been a Dortmund supporter for as long as I have been, I don't remember a Revierderby where I was less nervous. I wasn't nervous. I turned it on. I'm like, okay, let's watch this. And it was just, even though Dortmund didn't score in the first half, I was never worried. Watching the way Dortmund played, the way Schalke tried to maybe kind of play, It just, I was like, Dortmund's going to win this one. They're going to score a couple of goals. This is going to be an easy peasy training match almost. And that's really what it was. Schalke are legitimately that bad. Dortmund are good. Schalke made them look exceptionally good. But Schalke are just really, really, really bad.
Yeah, especially on the ball, Schalke have pretty much zero things going forward for them. So, that was almost expected. I was a little nervous about some lucky set piece. Sometimes Schalke do have that dumbfounded luck where you absolutely have no idea where it's coming from, but, a set piece or some weird deflected shot or something can happen.
Yeah, but they don't have Daniel Caligiuri. So
yes,
Caligiuri, he got his set-piece goal against Dortmund, and it was not for Schalke, so it's all good.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is that Dortmund sometimes also famously trip over their own dicks. So sometimes that happens too, where they should easily beat Schalke and then somehow find a way to not do that. But this Schalke team doesn't even have the capability to make Dortmund trip up, to be honest. So that was a very soothing game, I would say. I think there needs to be a slight disclaimer. I think most listeners would agree that this is not the 100% derby feeling that you usually would have, since the stadium is pretty much empty and there are like 300 fans or so in there. So usually ahead of a derby, at least a whole week, you kind of sense the anticipation, and it's an important game, and you are really, almost anxious that you will be the one coming out on top, so you have all the banter on your side, etc. I feel like right now, this just, the whole derby feeling just isn't as high. So, but that being said, it was still a nice game, and maybe it probably would have been more exhilarating had it been a full stadium. But the way it is, it was sort of a perfect smooth sailing game for Dortmund. And so I guess let's talk about how Lucien Favre changed his team a little bit. He switched from a back three to a back four. I mean, I think he already finished out the game against Lazio with a back four, but this time Manuel Akanji was back after overcoming his COVID-19 diagnosis and the quarantine. And he slotted in next to Mats Hummels, and on the left you had Rafael Guerreiro, who probably had one of the better games, and Thomas Meunier, who also had a solid performance. And then in the defensive midfield, we had Mahmoud Dahoud and Thomas Delaney, and then in the number 10, Julian Brandt, and that coupled with Gio Reyna and Jadon Sancho, and up front, obviously, Erling Haaland. So, Matthias, setup-wise, what did you make of this? What worked well for Dortmund with this system, and what didn't work so well?
Well, I mean, given the nature of this Schalke team, it was actually the right time to switch to a back four. The only thing that going into it, seeing it, that I was a little concerned about was maybe pace exploitation, because Rabia Matondo is extremely fast. But when I saw him get outpaced by Manuel Akanji, I was like, nah, we're good. It's fine. Don't worry about it. This is, and then, Benito Raman coming on. It's like the guy can't even score I guess he tries to, but he can't score. Paciencia had like one shot, I think, and that was really it. So it worked well. Dortmund were able to really stifle anything that Schalke tried to get going in central midfield. Pressing-wise, Dortmund played, I thought, actually quite well. They passed out of the press exceptionally well. I mean, Schalke tried in the beginning to press really high, did so situationally, and Dortmund just passed around them as if they weren't even there, which was really... If there was a time for them to step on certain anatomy parts, as you so eloquently put it, that probably would have been the time, but it didn't happen. And I think what helps is you have both Mats Hummels and Manuel Akanji playing in their preferred natural positions, left-sided central defender and right-sided central defender. And really, I guess he could have gone with a back three, and then, Akanji on the left and Piszczek on the right. But, now everyone really slotted into their natural preferred position. I think once Zagadou is back, or maybe even once Emre Can is back, which will be a few weeks now due to his COVID-19 quarantine and diagnosis, I think they may go back to a back three, but it really depends on how they play in the next few weeks with this back four. I mean, I don't know if Bielefeld's going to be the massive bar to test it, but St. Petersburg definitely could be one. But I thought everybody played naturally, played really well. Delaney, just loved the guy. Dahoud, to me, had one of the best games he's had at Dortmund. He really controlled the passing, controlled and dictated the tempo. Didn't play his Hollywood balls he likes to do at times that don't quite make it. And honestly, overall, everybody played quite well. I don't really have any complaints. I think Gio Reyna played a little bit better than Jadon Sancho, but marginally, Haaland is Haaland. As long as you don't put a GIF of his goal celebration in your tweet, you'll be fine. But other than that, I think Dortmund did well. It was maybe a bit risk, but not against this Schalke side. I mean, this team, Schalke, is just non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one criticism to make, is that Dortmund needed an awful long time to really get going. I mean, the first goal was scored in the 55th minute. I could make the case that if you mount the pressure a little bit higher and try a little harder in the first half, you can already score against this Schalke team. I mean, I think you correctly pointed out that Dortmund were really good at playing around Schalke's pressing, and this is probably the biggest improvement between the Schalke game and the Lazio game, because famously that already fell apart after like 6 minutes. So that was definitely much better. That being said, I think that Schalke overall were much more timid. I mean, their wing backs, since they were playing with a back 3/back 5, didn't really advance as high. I mean, Kilian Ludovic, who is their right wing back, hardly ever crossed the halfway line. And Bastian Oczipka was also not as offensively as he often has been in his past. So that was very Manuel Baum-like, I would say, that you just focus on keeping a very solid and organized defense, and then, hope and pray that at some point there are some counterattacks that fall your way or the opponent makes a mistake or so. But that Schalke team was really focused against the ball and not trying to do too many things on the ball. That being said, what I find interesting is, despite Guerreiro playing against Ludovic and Ludovic not pressing as much, as I said, he did press Guerreiro often, and which is why Guerreiro in this game had the most passes under pressure, which were 14, leading the team with that. And while I'm here, because Guerreiro, to me, had such an exceptional game, he was leading the team in touches with 148. He was leading the team in progressive passing yards, 791, and also progressive carries in 329 yards. So overall, he had a very good game when it comes to being the offensive outlet for Dortmund and getting things going. He's obviously a very intelligent player, and we have said that repeatedly. I mean, Dortmund need Guerreiro in this form to get some spark. That being said, I also liked, how involved he was in the combination play, and it's quite normal of Dortmund to clog up the left side of the field, then to free up stuff on the right side. This is probably why he faced the most passes under pressure, not because he was pressed on the, halfway line by Ludovic, but because he was already in the final third. Rafael Guerreiro with a really solid game, I would say. And as you've already pointed out, Dahoud, I don't know if it was his best game for Dortmund, but it was definitely a great game. And Lars and I in the previous show have bickered a little bit about Axel Witsel and the lack of aggressiveness he shows off the ball and how he slows everything down when he's on the ball. And the double pivot of Delaney and Dahoud, I think, really worked like a charm, and either confirms that Lucien Favre is an avid Yellowwallpod listener, or just that we are not completely blind in our analysis, and it's a little bit in lockstep of what the coaching team is observing. So I think that was a key change, because Dahoud was leading the team in pressures, and side nudge to Jordan Hunt, because he wanted to know about Jadon Sancho, and Jadon Sancho had 10 pressures. So that's where I would say why Jadon Sancho improved over other games, because he was really involved. And when you see Sancho press opponents and backtrack, I think he tends to have better games. But back to Dahoud, I thought his aggressiveness, how he pressed and how quickly he distributed the ball, really helped Dortmund out a lot and made things far more uncomfortable for Schalke, and really also helped to pin them down. And obviously, when you have the aggressive Delaney next to you, that's just makes it so much harder for a team like Schalke that can hardly control the ball. Where everyone has the the trampoline touch, basically. It's really hard for Schalke to retain the ball in midfield and play through there, especially when Dortmund lost the ball around Schalke's box. It really took just a couple of seconds until they had regained possession, and this is how you really dominate an opponent, and that's exactly why Dortmund had 75 or 74 or 73, however it's measured percent of possession. So I was really happy with that setup, and I will add, and obviously this only probably counts for a game against Schalke where the opponent is this crap, but Julian Brandt had a decent game, and obviously in the number 10 role there is way more he can do than as a number 8, because his defensive responsibility isn't as high, I would say, even though in a high profile game the number 10 still has to work a lot, but at least for this kind of scenario, especially with the Hood and Delaney behind him, he can focus a little bit more on the classic playmaking style. And even though he didn't get a goal or an assist, I still think he helped this team create gaps and spaces. And I think the stat that says a lot about his game is that he's leading the team in switches of play with 4. So also very, very happy about him. So yeah, Matthias, do you think that this double pivot or this setup with Brandt as a number 10 and Dahoud and Delaney behind is something we'll get to see more often?
Well, I mean, if Favre decides to continue with the back 4, it does make sense. It's a very natural position for Julian Brandt. It does help press the opposition a little bit more, because you're obviously in a more advanced position to begin with. It just depends on consistency. I mean, Delaney is very consistent in what he brings. Dahoud doesn't have the track record of consistency, but maybe this is a kind of match and you build upon it to bring that in. Obviously, in a couple of weeks, you'll have Emre Can back, and then it's time to make a decision. Back 3, back 4, double pivot, single pivot with 2 8s ahead of it. That's really the decision that has to be made. But I believe, at least for the next, as long as Emre Can is in quarantine, then I would be surprised if we don't see the Delaney-Dahoud double pivot quite often, if not all the time.
Yeah, what I will say about Brandt is that his him playing on the number 10 position is obviously always in danger, in jeopardy, due to Marco Reus being fit and healthy right now. I mean, he was rested for this game for most parts and brought on later, but it's still interesting how many options we have in this time. Schalke actually made all 5 substitutions, but before we while I'm highlighting individual players, I also would like to highlight that Thomas Meunier finally had a good game. I mean, he was pretty awful in previous matches, or just, I guess, solid. But I thought in this one he was a little more than solid. I thought he really had a good game, even though he is not the perfect fit, I guess, for out and out right back. But I still think against Schalke, where there was so little threat for him defensively, he shut Schalke down. He got a very important block where I think Schalke had pretty much the only shot, which may have gone on target, who knows. And obviously he created that chance for Gio Reyna, who then had it a little wide. I think there was a really nice outside of the boot cross. I think he also probably should have scored. He forced Renault to a really good save. So, it was a very solid performance. And I like that he wasn't just sticking to the right back position way often is, but was floating around as Schalke's numbers allowed it. And so that speaks to some positional awareness that he has and some footballing IQ, at least from the positional standpoint. So, since he has been harped on relentlessly in the past games, and very often it was justified. I think now it's also time to highlight that he had a good game in the Revierderby, which is always a positive. So yeah, and obviously also good for Dortmund's overall structure that Manuel Akanji is back. I mean, obviously he had the highest pass completion with 96 passes because his passes are maybe not as risky as Hummels. And it was good to see that both Hummels and Akanji both dribbled with the ball forward every now and then, just because against a deep-sitting opponent like Schalke, you can do that. And so I'm very happy with that. And obviously Akanji then scores the first goal for Dortmund. And Matthias, I thought it was nice to see A, that Dortmund scored 2 set-piece goals, and B, set-piece goals that looked trained, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it helped with the Hummels goal that was there anybody even near him? I don't remember. I think that was the most open I've seen Mats Hummels header from a set piece. And I always feel like usually when a player is that wide open, they tend to completely shank it. But it was nice to see, because that's been a criticism for a while with Dortmund. Set piece defending, but I feel like that's gotten better. But then set piece scoring. I don't know if that's just not a major focus or what, but it was very. It made me rather optimistic. I don't think, it's not one of those games where, Dortmund needed necessarily set pieces to beat a tough, deep-sitting, disciplined side. So then it's even nicer. It was just kind of complementary to the overall performance and just leaves you feeling warm on these cold fall days.
Yeah, definitely. Also, the second goal was kind of funny because Haaland was standing there in midfield with the ball and then was sort of just waiting for Sancho. I think he even said after the game that he was waiting for Sancho to make a run so he could play a through ball, but then Haaland said that Sancho doesn't like to sprint, so basically it was a 1-2 moment, and then it was really perfectly put on a platter. And that chip, my word, that's just world class. The way he takes the ball with him and then has a couple more steps and then chips it over the keeper. Pretty insane goal to score. And it's really nice how well he's doing these. I mean, obviously he can improve by doing it even more regularly, but God.
He's one of the most naturally gifted goal scorers I have ever seen. There's only one other that, taking the Ronaldos and stuff like that out, one other player of the generation that I've seen that's more gifted or as gifted, and that's another former Dortmund player in Lewandowski. I mean, it's like it's almost automatic with these guys when they get in and around the box that they're going to take a shot. It's usually going to be on target, and then oftentimes it's going to be a goal. Whereas there are other players that have played for Dortmund in the past, Nelson Valdez, where they could be standing completely alone and never score. So he's definitely not a Chancentot. He is definitely a guy that you're surprised when he doesn't score, versus other players where you're a little surprised when they actually do score.
I think what Dortmund is still doing wrong is playing the ball not often enough to him. I still think there are a lot of situations where you can feed him the ball just vertically. Obviously, that's one of my main gripes so far this season, that Dortmund play things really slowly, and you can often see, on the edge of the screen, Haaland is running into space behind the backline, and then at the same time, on the other edge of the screen, you see Dortmund's defender receiving the ball as it's being a back pass, and then Haaland sometimes, visibly is frustrated with his teammates that he didn't get a pass or whatever. But I think, obviously you don't have to go for the Hollywood pass every now and then, but still, I think that sometimes a very easy vertical pass to Haaland helps more then it hurts. And sometimes I think Dortmund are a little bit too timid or just don't see it. So there needs to be a Haaland awareness program for his runs so that Dortmund players find him even more frequently because he's just that good.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's where kind of a central passing axis of Hummels, Dahoud, and Brandt helps Haaland, because those are players that will look for the forward, vertical, more high-risk pass more often than if you do have Axel Witsel, who is definitely more the play the safe pass option. It's funny when you have Witsel and Emre Can play next to each other. Can is the more expressive passer of the two because he's just more aggressive by nature. Delaney is obviously the recycler when he's next to Dahoud, and that makes sense. You can't have two guys playing those kind of passes because you're just going to get into trouble. But when you have that more expressive passing, because obviously Hummels likes to do it, and he has the best vision given also his position on the pitch. Less likely to get pressured. He can see the runs early enough and can play some of the most brilliant passes I have ever seen, not just for a central defender, but in general. And that's what I believe, not to shock people, but to compliment Mahmoud Dahoud. That is one of the key attributes that he brings over in Axel Witsel, is his willingness to play that ball. He needs to be better at it at times.
Yeah, and he needs to aim a little lower.
Yes, he needs to aim a little bit lower. But he's at least willing to do it. And he's obviously not Gundogan. Gundogan was one of the best at those types of passes ever, period. But he's getting there. He's had a few matches where I'm like, oh, okay, I can see where it's going. And if he has the right support people around him where he's not completely left alone, so a real hard worker next to him who doesn't mind running into the spaces that get opened up due to an attempted high-risk pass that doesn't pay off, like a Delaney or a Can, I think that's the kind of situation where Dahoud can definitely flourish.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we've talked about the aggression that he brings to the table, and say if you need to be a bit more aggressive, you switch out Brandt for Royce, and then you will have a lot of counter-pressing going on for you just automatically. And I think that's a good thing to have. We haven't even talked about Jude Bellingham this entire time, who obviously is also really good at playing in midfield and just sort of describes the plethora of options that Dortmund have right now. I would struggle to take Dahoud out for the next game. Maybe Favre does it anyway, but I think he has deserved to play another round at least and show that he can do the same against Zenit. And, we've talked about consistency. This is, I guess, how you build it. I'm very pleased with that. I'm also pleased with the way Dortmund tried to unlock Schalke and how they had far more answers this time. Just to highlight one stat in the entire game, even though Schalke were super defensive with their low block, and Dortmund only had a total of 6 crosses. It was 13 against Lazio, just for context. So, a lot more happening through Dortmund's middle. And, I think that was very positive overall. Obviously, if you score earlier and if you go for it a little harder, I think this could have been an absolute blowout again. Could have been a 6-0, 7-0. I don't know, because the Schalke team at some point will fall apart. But I mean, credit a little bit to Schalke, because if I remember their first game of the season against Bayern, where they lost 8-0, they were not only terrible, but they were also naive in how far they pushed out and how often they ran into a counterattack. And that being said, in that game, they were also a little bit more hopeful. And, the first 5 minutes against Bayern, Schalke looked really good. They were pressing, they were winning things and winning the ball and having counter attacks. And I think almost scored. But in the end, they were completely picked apart. And this Schalke is a bit more disillusioned about their own skills, let's say. So I guess that helps in that regard, that they know what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. So instead of losing 6-0, Schalke are losing 3-0. So this is pretty much for them pretty good. I mean, Dortmund so far this season, I think, haven't even scored once in the first half. So this is definitely still room for improvement there for Dortmund, and to up the ante right from the start and not basically trying to feel out the opponent. The old Favre prayer of patience is a little annoying in that regard, but if you win this serenely, you can't complain. But when you think back to the Lazio game, you definitely can. So there are two sides of that medal, but obviously for this kind of game, I think it's almost perfect because, as you said, Dortmund built really calmly out of the back, hardly give away the ball in a stupid way, make it really hard for Schalke to pounce on errors because there are very few. And then, of course, eventually you will just score due to being the better team. And, with that really nice set piece design where, I think Guerrero ended up with the shot, which was saved. And then Akanji, obviously, with the tap in. I think that's quite a nice and solid game. And obviously, Dortmund are still third in the table and, collecting the very necessary points. So, for a derby performance, as you said, Matthias, very pleased. Any other points you want to make on this game that I haven't mentioned yet?
No, I think we've covered it rather thoroughly. I think, if Schalke wants to not get relegated this season, they need to actually have an idea at some point. I mean, it was like, Manuel Baum is the former coach for Augsburg, and Schalke are like a crappy Augsburg. And they try to play like Augsburg, but they're not good enough as a team. They don't have the right players to play like Augsburg. I don't know if that's positive for Augsburg or negative for Schalke. I'll let everybody decide that for themselves. But this is not going to save them. What's going to save them at this rate is the fact that there are other teams, specifically like Köln, Mainz, that are just really, really bad. But at least those teams do occasionally score a goal or get a shot on target. Schalke don't even have that. And so it's, I don't really know where they're going to go with this. I don't know. I mean, can they not get relegated? Sure. But they need to change a lot quickly. Otherwise, Schalke will be playing in the Zweite Bundesliga next season. It's that plain and simple. At this point, they are hapless. And, Manuel Baum talking about, becoming more solid, and that's why he got brought in. He's probably the best coach they could get, given what they are anymore these days. But even that wasn't there. If you're going to play defensive, you better play like Augsburg did against Dortmund. Disciplined and ruthless. And Schalke are just not that. I mean, you can't play defensive and then leave gaps. I mean, that's just like, you're just asking to get your ass kicked at that point. And I think that Schalke, I know you mentioned it wasn't really a derby because of the lack of atmosphere. I think Schalke can be thankful for that. I think had it been a full stadium of chanting Dortmund supporters, I think players like Erling Haaland would be even more pushed. And I think they would have blown Schalke away with even more goals. So the fact that there was the one Schalke fan in the stands with 299 Dortmund fans.
Yeah, who was escorted out because otherwise it would have been torture. So, the Human Rights Council was sent in to bring him out.
Amnesty International calls like, hey, you got to get him out of there. This is not fair. This is inhumane. No, but it's just, they can be thankful that the atmosphere is what it is. And Schalke fans, you can be thankful you didn't spend money to watch this piece of shit team. So you're welcome in that sense because, I actually kind of feel bad for Schalke fans. Well, let me rephrase that. after what happened to Moukoko, I don't really feel bad for Schalke fans.
Yeah, no.
So there you go.
No,
get relegated. You deserve it.
I don't have an ounce of pity with me. No, but I think we should mention that Dortmund was there for the fight. They were certainly aggressive. I think Schalke were a little too aggressive here and there with stamping Dortmund players' feet all the time. I mean, Omar Mascarell got a yellow card and remained the only player of the entire game with the booking. And I think there were a couple more fouls, which probably deserved a yellow card. But, especially in the first half, Schalke were overly aggressive. I think that sort of abated as time progressed. And obviously, I think I should mention the substitutions that Favre made, because he brought on Felix Passlack and Witzel for Reina and Dahoud. And obviously that was a pretty cool substitution, meaning the Passlack one because he just offered a lot more running and allowed Guerrero to play higher up the field. So I think for the future that can be a very good substitution to really invigorate the left side if you need it, just because Passlack likes to run into space, especially if he has only 20 minutes left, so he can really exhaust himself. And you could see that, especially a player like, say, Delaney or Hummels, who have these switches of place in them. If you open up the space in some way or some form, Felix Passlack can be a real weapon as a left back, and I think he'll be able to play the same thing as a right back. Also positive to see that Mathieu Moret made his first cameo this season. 10-minute one for Thomas Meunier. So I think it was good to see him. And I think, the time he played looked pretty solid. Yeah, I wanted to mention that, and obviously it's a big boost for Dortmund also that Torgen Hazard is back, and the 13 minutes he got, he looked quite lively as well. So Matthias, I think after the horrible day in Rome, this was really a nice time for Dortmund, and I was a little fearful that Dortmund could act as the slump buster, but this time it was actually Schalke. So that means Dortmund now go all invigorated with a nice boost into the next Champions League tie against Zenit. So this is obviously a game I'm looking forward to because it's a home game. So I'm more optimistic naturally. What are you expecting now from Dortmund in the Champions League against Zenit, who I think lost their first matchup against Club Brugge and then lost to Rubin Kazan this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, Zenit are a little bit on a slump, but I also said that about Lazio. I mean, they were a little bit inconsistent, but, Zenit has been playing a little bit longer. They started the season kind of like a house on fire, and then it's really been down for the most part since they lost to Dynamo Moscow. They are sitting third in the Russian league table, wedged in between all the Muscovite teams. Spartak and CSKA ahead of them, with Lokomotiv and Dynamo right behind them. I mean, they're the big money club, theoretically, in the Russian league. They've got a few players we may remember. They have Douglas Santos, who used to play for Hamburg, so there's that. They have Dejan Lovren, who obviously as a Dortmund fan you don't like to remember, from the Europa League.
Don't mention it.
And then, they've got a few decent, young players. They've got, trying to see here.
They have
Wendell.
They have
who's pretty good.
They have Artem Zuyuba, or I don't know how you actually pronounce him, but
Artem Juba.
Yeah. Anywho,
Yeah.
he I watched the game against Bruges a little bit, and he to me looks a bit like the next Yarmolenko. He is a very tall striker or midfielder, very technically gifted. Very lumbering run, but someone that certainly can impose himself on defenders, and didn't have his best game against Bruges, but I saw the potential of what he can do. Not that I want him as a Dortmund player. I don't think his profile necessarily fits the black and yellows, as one Yarmolenko, I think, underscored. But that being said, someone to watch out for, because he is a good hold-up player, and he seems to be also very smart footballing IQ. I mean, I'm only going off of one game that I watched, but someone I wanted to highlight because I certainly recognized that he can do some danger, not the way that Zenit played necessarily against Bruges, because just the entire build-up play wasn't good enough. Simply, I think this is probably where their big problems lie. I think Barrios in midfield and Ozdoyev didn't really energize this Zenit team as they arguably should have been. I think Bruges were very solid, very clever. I mean, they had this one own goal, which was a little idiotic by the goalkeeper, but in the end, they still won. And, it was a little fortunate to win in like the 93rd minute or whenever it was, but it wasn't undeserved. So, Zenit obviously now on the back foot already, but so are Dortmund. Dortmund have played Zenit before. I mean, we all remember Axel Witsel playing for Zenit against Dortmund. I don't know. It's not like I'm the big Russian football expert, but I'll confidently say that this should be a rather easy game for Dortmund, because Zenit are not that well organized at the back.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, Dejan Lovren, he can be great, or he can be horrific. Khazkitsky, Netska, I mean, they're not exactly blessed with pace centrally. They'll probably line up again in a 4-1-4-1 type formation. Keep Barrios kind of as that shield ahead of the central defenders. Douglas Santos is a pretty good fullback, but he has his defensive liabilities. He'll be on the left side, so he'll be matched up on the Meunier side, which is obviously not necessarily bad, because you'll have the Meunier cover and then probably Sancho attacking Santos. So I think, Zenit can be gotten, especially in Dortmund, which does help, not just in times of COVID, but just in times in general. If you don't have to go to St. Petersburg in fall or winter, that's usually a good thing. It's a long trip, and it tends to be a little chilly, and the pitch always tends to be rather an issue. So this definitely plays into Dortmund's favor and Dortmund's hand, because, like I said, Zenit coming off of that loss to Rubin Kazan. Rubin Kazan is not a good side. So I'm not saying Zenit is going to be, it's not going to be Schalke. I mean, they're definitely going to have chances. They're definitely going to create some opportunities, but I agree with you in the sense that Dortmund should win this match. I feel more confident with them beating, I almost said Rubin Kazan, Zenit St. Petersburg, than I was them beating Lazio, even though I was relatively confident, but that match just completely fell to pieces so fast. I don't think that's going to happen here.
Well, also just because Dortmund are a completely different beast at home in the Champions League. I went through the record last episode, how horrendous their road form is. On the other hand, Dortmund at home have mostly really great games. I mean, the scoreless draw against Barcelona was almost a pity that they didn't win it. I mean, they even had a penalty, etc. But they've pounced Atletico. They came back against Inter in great fashion. They've repeatedly beaten Real Madrid. I'll be honest. This should not be this should not be a nail biter. I think this Dortmund side will probably put Zenit away 3-0, 4-0, something like that. Just because they need to show a reaction still. That was sort of the theme going in the Revierderby, but I think you need to show the reaction also in the same competition. And now you have ample opportunity to do that, and obviously not having to travel helps a really big way. And Favre also can rotate a little bit, but I don't know if he will. obviously the Bielefeld match is coming up, which we will talk about in the next episode on Thursday. So we'll be out by Friday by the latest, Matthias. But if you would make changes to the lineup, who would you change? Where would you make the switches?
Well, I guess it really depends on individual fitness. You could consider starting Paslak in place of Thomas Meunier, depending on where you weight things. Is it the Zenit game or the Bielefeld match? That's one that I could see. I expect to see a few more minutes for Torgan Hazard. Maybe this is the kind of match where you bring in Marco Reus and you play him instead of maybe Gio Reyna. So you have a Reus with Julian Brandt type situation. I think those could be possible ones. I don't see a change in the double pivot.
Also,
That just wouldn't make
sticking with
sense.
the back four? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. No, I would definitely stick with the back four at this point because you have no Emre Can. I wouldn't necessarily risk it with Piszczek at this time. The back four played very, very well against Schalke. And with the amount of substitutions you can make, you can still switch it to a back three, depending on how the match unfolds. But I think I would just stick with the same formation like they had against Schalke and then just go from there.
Yeah, I wonder if when Favre plays Reus, whether he will actually take Brandt out and then you have Hazard or Reyna and Sancho on the wings and then sort of just play the old Favre 4-4-2, where Reus obviously drifts off a little bit of Haaland. This is something I could see, the old 4-4 Favre system. It felt like the back three and back five they was playing felt a little forced, and for some reason it didn't quite kickstart Dortmund season as much as they would have liked. And Favre, I think, had planned to switch to a back four anyway, and now he's gotten his wish, so to speak. So yeah, I can definitely see something like that happening. Obviously, Dortmund can also play with a 4-3-3 system or something like that. Because let's be real, the flexibility Dortmund have right now is really, really great. It's maybe where what we were talking about during the Tuchel era a little bit. And I'm also just very happy with all the options that Dortmund have, where I feel like they can competently switch around. Because in the past that was often an issue, especially in the club time, where it was often a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 system, but there was rarely back three applied, and now Dortmund has evolved over. I mean, it's been a long time, but over the Stöger and Bosch and Tuchel era, now under Favre, definitely they are a team that are very comfortable playing in different systems, and I think now they also have a squad that's really well set up for various systems. Obviously, you could add a couple more defenders. So when a Can or a Zagadou are out, then, it's already tricky with the back three, but, it's also not that you can completely forget about the system right now. So, I'm a little concerned with Zenit's intensity, whether they will actually be up for the game, and whether they will press Dortmund like they must if they want to have a chance, and whether the gaps between the players are tight enough for them to defend. Russian teams often have this problem where they have high amounts of individual skill, but the collective tactical aptitude isn't as high as it should be, and hence they sometimes make weird positional errors that you should not make in the Champions League. But that being said, Dortmund on the road certainly have similar issues. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this game. I really would like to see Hazard in the starting lineup if it were me, just from a rotational standpoint, but I'm pretty sure that he isn't fit enough to do that yet, or at least play maybe one half or so, because you really absolutely need to do some job sharing on several positions. And I think so far Favre has done okay in that regard. What do you make of the rotation machine so far?
Overall, better than I expected it to be. Obviously, injuries, quarantine, stuff like that hamper things at times. But overall, I think he's managed it relatively well, and the squad depth is there to do that, aside from maybe the striker position. That's you're concerned about central defenders. I have some concerns there too. I think occasionally you'll have to give Haaland time off, also for just the kid's own benefit, because he just doesn't have any quit in him. But then you lack just that option as another striker, and that's to me is a bit of a concern. Whoever you throw in there, kind of a hybrid, whether it's an Hazard or a Reus or a Sancho, is just not a striker, and that to me that's an issue I have.
No, it's a huge issue, and I think Dortmund should have addressed it. But I think they also would have if it were financially feasible, to be honest. But it's not an easy thing to do. Maybe in the winter transfer window they'll try to do something like that. I'm also not entirely sure if you want to rely on Yusufa Moukoko already. It's probably a bit much to ask, but obviously he'll get probably a couple of minutes here and there. Who knows? Lucien Favre knows that he can trust young players, and also Moukoko probably in that striker position is, at least from his finishing skills, should be ready for the Bundesliga without a doubt. But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Dortmund were a bit lucky that Hoffenheim were without Kramaric, so they could afford to rest Haaland and Reus in that game, and then bring them on later and sort of win it. But in other situations, if you can't play Haaland, Dortmund are really showing just how dependent they are on him. So obviously they can still score and create goals without Haaland, but you can see that structurally it's a bit different. That's maybe something I wanted to mention in the derby, because Manuel Akanji said it post-game that Haaland's hold-up play with the ball is sort of improving from game to game, and I totally agree. I thought that there were several situations against Schalke where if it weren't for him, Dortmund probably wouldn't have dominated and controlled this game as severely as they did. And so obviously that's also a really important skill to have against teams like Zenit, where you come up against very robust defenders, and if you can manage to hold the ball against these players, then Dortmund should have a lot of things going for them in a transition. I don't think that Zenit will just sit back and try to low block the game like Augsburg or Schalke tried to, or Lazio for that matter. I just don't think that's really the kind of characteristic that's in Zenit, so I assume that Dortmund will actually score a couple more goals on the counter. So unless you have anything else to say, I'll just go ahead and predict the match, Matthias.
Go ahead, wise sage.
Yeah, I'm picking a 4-1 win for Dortmund.
I'm going to be a little more conservative. I'm going a 2-0 victory for Dortmund.
I just don't see that Dortmund only scored 2 goals in this game. I just don't know. I don't know how. Like the second.
I'm tired, Stefan.
Yeah, but
okay, I'm not sleeping much, so
the second half is way too long for Dortmund to not add a third. I'm sorry. That's just how it is. And now that I've said it, they probably win 2-0. But I don't care. Anyway, Matthias, if you want to go back to sleep with a newborn around, if that's even possible right now, you may now tell our listeners where to find you on Twitter once you're not in Twitter jail.
I was going to say, I've been in Twitter jail twice. And the first time I have no idea what happened. I told people to go out and vote, and mail-in ballots are safe, and all of a sudden my Twitter didn't work.
I'm
sure that was a coincidence.
Yeah, I think that actually was because it coincided with Twitter being down for many accounts. I don't think it was just a you problem. But
I see in here, I thought it was Russian hackers.
No.
And then I got put in Twitter jail because of the DFL, and it wasn't just me, Jan Arge Fjordhoff as well. We tweeted after the Holland goal a GIF with him celebrating with Jadon Sancho, and it was a GIF taken out of a match sequence, and the marketing agency for the German Football League basically cried to Twitter about a whole bunch of Twitter users, and everyone had their accounts blocked for a while. I didn't even know it because I didn't go on Twitter for a while, and I went, what? What happened? And so, but yeah, assuming I don't do that again, you can find me on Twitter at Matthiasuk.
Yeah, I really know that, they do this on behalf of the TV rights holders, and they are somewhat diligent about it. If you tweet the wrong GIF or video or whatever, which is sort of spliced out of the feed, especially if the watermark is still in there, the algorithm or whatever will catch it, or some guy sitting somewhere in an agency scrolling through sort of tweets and whatnot. This can certainly happen to anyone. So please be careful. But I'll say this again. I don't think if you're a TV rights holder, a GIF on Twitter should be your concern. I don't think that's the copyright infringement where you tend to lose money. I think the opposite is true. This is sort of the thing where you want people to highlight your product on social media and interact with the multimedia world that we have these days. So, just to say it on the record again, this is stupid.
Yeah, and you could even make a legal argument for fair use because, it was in the Twitter GIF library. I couldn't access it if it wasn't in there. And I tweeted about Haaland scoring a goal for Dortmund, celebrating with Jadon Sancho, and the GIF was him scoring a goal for Dortmund with Jadon Sancho in the Bundesliga. That could be taken as fair use because I was speaking about exactly what was in that GIF in a roundabout way. But either way, I agree with you. It's completely ludicrous. I doubt ESPN lost millions of revenue for people putting out a GIF of a 2-second goal celebration that I don't even know from which match it was. It's just stupid.
Yeah, but from a Schalke perspective, it was certainly unfair use. But
yeah, well.
Anywho, let's not beat that horse any further. And let's just move on. You can find me on Twitter at Stefan Butzko, and you can find all of us at Yellowwallpod on Twitter and Facebook. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, please do that via YouTube. Just type in Yellowwallpod and you will find this in video format. It takes a little longer to upload and for it to process than it appears on iTunes, etc. But you can subscribe to our YouTube channel pretty please. That certainly will help us. And obviously, like I said, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, etc., where you can subscribe to this podcast, all the various means and ways. And obviously, you can contribute financially on patreon.com/theyellowwall. And if you want to find our written content, which I admit has been a little barren, but as soon as I find the time, which should be very soon, there should be more written content up. So look out for that. And obviously, as always, thank you for listening. And obviously, thank you for sharing our content and enjoying derby wins like the previous ones with us. And so, as always, goodbye and stay safe.